The courtroom was silent, save for the hum of the projector flickering to life. Every eye in the packed chamber was locked on the screen. A grainy surveillance video played. The figures on the screen, 2 police officers, shifted nervously as they handled evidence, their faces barely visible under the dim security lighting. Then came the damning moment. One officer palmed a small bag and tucked it into a box labeled Anderson vs. State. A smug grin stretched across his face as he patted the other officer's shoulder. Gasps filled the air. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with neatly combed silver hair, paled visibly, his grip on his pen tightening until his knuckles turned white.At the defense table. Emma Lawson sat still, her dark eyes locked on the screen. She had waited for this moment, endured the humiliation, the betrayal, the loss of everything she had worked for, all to get to this very second when the truth would shatter the lies spun against her. But before we get to reckoning, let's go back to where it all began. Emma Lawson had built her career on one unshakable principle: justice above all else. As a defense attorney in Chicago, she had fought for those the system had forgotten, earning a reputation for her razor-sharp mind and unwavering dedication to her clients. She was a woman who never backed down, who stood her ground in courtrooms where corruption and prejudice festered in the shadows. So when she took on a case that exposed a ring of officers planting evidence in low-income black neighborhoods, she knew the risks, but Emma had no idea just how far they would go to silence her. The morning it all fell apart was cold, the kind of Chicago winter that cut through even the thickest wool coat. Emma was in her office, preparing for another case, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "This is Emma Lawson," she answered. A voice on the other end, smooth but edged with something smug, sent a chill down her spine. "Miss Lawson, you need to come down to station. There's been a development in one of your cases. Bring your lawyer." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "Excuse me?" There was a beat of silence. Then the voice added, almost lazily, "You're under investigation for tampering with evidence in the Anderson case. We suggest you cooperate." Emma stared at the screen as the call disconnected. She didn't feel fear. Not yet. What she felt was anger, a slow, simmering rage that burned in the pit of her stomach. She had won the Anderson case just 2 weeks ago, proving that the police had planted drugs in her client's car. The case had embarrassed the department, sparked protests, and sent 2 officers to administrative leave pending an internal investigation. And now, those same officers were coming for her. Emma grabbed her coat and her case files. If they wanted to fight, they were about to get one. The station was already a circus when she arrived. Reporters were gathered outside, microphones in hand, shouting questions the moment she stepped out of her car. "Miss Lawson, did you tamper with evidence? Are the allegations true? Is this the end of your career?" She didn't stop to answer. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she walked straight into the building, her heels clicking against the polished floor, head held high. Inside, Detective Mark Sullivan, a man with an impeccable record and a practiced smile, was waiting for her. His suit was crisp, his demeanor cool. "Emma," he greeted, as if they were old friends. "Detective, thank you for coming in voluntarily. That will make things easier." "Easier for who?" she shot back. Sullivan smirked. "Follow me." She was led into an interrogation room, where a file lay open on the table. Photos, reports, a copy of a so-called confession she had never seen before. They had built their case carefully, but not carefully enough. "You're being accused of planting exonerating evidence in the Anderson case," Sullivan said, sitting across from her. "Security footage shows you entering the evidence room after hours." Emma leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "And I assume you have this footage." Sullivan's smirk faltered just slightly. "The footage has unfortunately been corrupted, but we have witnesses." "Of course you do." The arrest was swift. The charges were official, and the headlines exploded. High-profile attorney Emma Lawson accused of evidence tampering. Career in jeopardy. The words followed her like ghosts, and for the first time, doubt started creeping in. Emma was released on bail, but the damage was done. Her law firm distanced themselves. Clients stopped calling. Strangers online tore her apart, labeling her a fraud, a disgrace. But she wasn't done. Late at night, in her dimly lit apartment, Emma went through every case, every file, every piece of evidence. She wasn't just going to clear her name. She was going to expose the truth. And then, an unexpected ally arrived. Jack Mitchell, a former police officer turned private investigator, knocked on her door. He had seen the reports, knew the patterns, and he had something Emma didn't: access. Together, they dug. They found inconsistencies, missing files, altered reports. And then, the break they needed: surveillance footage. The real footage. It wasn't Emma in the evidence room. It was two officers, and they weren't just planting evidence. They were laughing about it. The case against Emma wasn't just weak. It was a lie. And now she had proof. She was going to take it to court, and she was going to win. The courtroom was packed. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made even the seasoned journalists in the press section sit up straighter. Outside, protesters gathered, some demanding Emma Lawson's conviction, others calling for truth. Emma sat at the defense table, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. She had spent years on this side of courtroom, defending people whose voices had been silenced. Now, she was the one being accused, but she was ready. The prosecution wasted no time painting her as a desperate attorney who had falsified evidence to win cases. Miss Lawson's success came at a cost. The prosecutor declared, his voice filled with feigned righteousness, and that cost was integrity. Emma barely reacted. Instead, she listened, taking in every contradiction, every assumption. They were relying on half-truths and missing pieces, and she had the one thing they didn't: evidence. When it was her turn to speak, she stood with calm confidence. "You claim I planted evidence," she said, addressing the jury. "You claim there is video footage of me entering the evidence room." She turned to the prosecutor. "Play the footage." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor hesitated, clearing his throat. The footage was, corrupted. Emma tilted her head. Convenient. The jury was listening now. She could see it in their eyes, the beginning of doubt, and that was just a start. One by one, Emma dismantled their case. She cross-examined Officer Parker first, the man who had claimed to see her enter the evidence room. "Officer Parker, where were you on the night in question?" "In the station," he answered too quickly. Emma nodded, walking over to the table. She picked up a thick file and flipped the page. "And yet, according to your own patrol log, you were on duty 5 miles away from the precinct." A hush fell over the room. Parker face paled. I must have." "Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" Emma asked, her voice sharp. Parker opened his mouth, closed it. Silence. The next witness, the officer who had signed the evidence report, fared no better. Under pressure, he tripped over his own statements, contradicting himself until his own lawyer had to stop the questioning. The cracks in the case were turning into chasms. And then came the final blow. Emma turned to her defense team. Jack Mitchell gave her a slight nod. It was time. She walked over to the evidence table, picking up a flash drive. "There is one more piece of evidence I would like to present." The prosecutor sat up straighter. "Objection. What new evidence?" The judge peered down. "Miss Lawson," Emma met the judge's gaze head-on. "This is the real surveillance footage from the evidence room, the footage that was allegedly corrupted." The prosecutor sputtered. "That's not possible." Emma's lips curled into the barest hint of a smile. "I guess we'll see." The screen flickered to life. The courtroom was silent. The footage showed 2 officers entering the evidence room, handling the very items that had been used to frame Emma. Their faces were clear. Their smirks were unmistakable. Gasps filled the room. A juror covered her mouth. Even the judge's usually stern expression shifted into something dangerously close to anger. The prosecutor paled. Emma turned to the jury. "This isn't just about me. This is about a system that punishes those who expose corruption. Today it was me. Tomorrow it could be someone else." The weight of her words settled in the room, and then the judge spoke. The jury didn't take long to deliberate. When they returned, the foreperson stood. "We, the jury, find defendant not guilty." The words rang through the courtroom like a gunshot. Emma closed her eye for a brief second, letting the relief wash over her. But she wasn't done. She turned, facing the officers at the prosecution table. The very people would try to destroy her. "This isn't over," she said, her voice steady, and she meant it. The fallout was swift. The officers involved were put on administrative leave. Investigations into police corruption reopened. Emma filed a lawsuit for defamation, and within weeks, the city was forced to reckon with what had been done. But the most surprising part, the public response. #Justice for Emma trended for weeks. The same people who doubted her, vilified her, were now rallying behind her. And for the first time in a long time, Emma felt something she hadn't in weeks. Hope, because this wasn't just a personal victory. This was the beginning of something bigger. And Emma Lawson wasn't going to stop fighting now.